Alright, morning guys. Welcome back to our next video and reading session. It's Tuesday the 5th of May, and as usual every Tuesday we'll be studying or having a discussion about the topic. And then Thursdays you'll get your assignment. So last week, we talked about calculations using the equal sign, and we talked about doing manual calculations. And when I say manual calculations, I mean calculations that are done using the signs like the plus sign, minus sign, and so forth. So just to go over the assignment real quick from last week, if you notice, I noticed some of you just went and added everything, and then from just number 2 here, I already see the wrong answer, because what I saw was that some of you just added and you weren't looking closely at the sign that was being used. So going forward, please pay attention to that. Alright, I saw people taking B5, and then instead of minusing the number at C5, which is 15, I saw a lot of people just adding and adding and adding. So make sure you pay attention, especially for the other assignments, okay? But this assignment was straightforward. I did number 1 for you. Answer was 29. Why is it 29? Well, B4, which is B4, which is 15, plus 12 plus 2 gives you the answer of 29. So that's pretty much what we've been doing and what we're going to do this week as well. You just have to be able to calculate. I saw a lot of wrong calculations too. I didn't really like that. You guys are in first form, and I'm seeing people can't add 3 numbers, so please fix yourself up. Make sure you go and carefully add or minus these numbers accordingly. And then don't feel too bad, I guess. The errors were like maybe 1 or 2 off. So if the answer was supposed to be like, for example, like 50, some people had like 48 or 52. So make sure you go ahead and fix those small errors in your addition and subtraction. Again, you're in first form, you should be able to add and subtract. Alright, so if you haven't done this assignment, please make sure you go ahead and finish it. Just wanted to mention that. For this week, we're going to continue on with Excel, continue with the operations, except we're moving on to the functions that Excel provides. The first thing I want to do is I'm going to put some random numbers and just have a list of different numbers that I can use. I'm not going to label them by number 1, number 2, number 3 like I did with the assignment, because this is more just to cover the lesson. Right? So I have a bunch of numbers here, and then with Excel, if you notice with the assignment, I've been doing things in one line. For example, I've taken A1, B1, C1, and I asked you to put the answer here. Going forward, you don't have to stick to just one line. If you decide, or if you so choose, you can pick from A1, you can pick from B3, you can pick from C4. It's kind of like a bingo set if you think about it. But I wanted to state that because the point of Excel is to be flexible and to give you control. You're not limited to just one row or one column at a time. You can select different sets of numbers, and that's the whole point of having a cell address, because you can refer to any number, any value using the cell address. So going forward, we've been doing manual operations. So I could say equals, and I'll say A1 plus plus C3. See, I don't have to stick to one row or one column. I can just put different cell addresses, and it will add those values if it contains a value. If it doesn't contain a value, for example like in D4 or the whole D column, then it just won't add anything, but it's still going to be there. If I want to put plus D3, it will highlight it, but the answer will remain the same because currently D3 doesn't have a value. If I decide to put a value there in the future and press enter, then it's going to add the value afterwards. So you could also prepare for the future when using Excel. For today's topic, we're going to cover the Excel functions. So I'm going to delete this. One of the first things you want to do is to look at this symbol here, this little almost looks like an E symbol and button here. If you click this button, it's going to go and automatically put in a function there for you. It's always usually sum function, and I want you to note a couple things here. With Excel functions, they're characterized, one, by the equal sign. Again, we've established that the equal sign lets Excel know that we're going to do a calculation with whatever follows this equal sign. One next characteristic is that for functions, you notice there's no use of symbols, there's no use of the plus sign, because the word sum, and it's written in all caps, tells the Excel that we're going to use a function that's built into Excel, and this function is called sum. And we should know that when we're dealing with the sum of numbers, we're dealing with the addition of those numbers. Therefore, we don't need the addition sign. A third characteristic of a function is these brackets here. It's important to have these brackets because everything within these brackets are basically the numbers that we'll be using. So there's two ways to perform addition using this sum function. This one uses a colon, and we've started this today. The colon tells us that, alright, we're not just adding A1 and A5. The colon signifies a range, and a range is basically a limit or a space between two cell addresses, or two numbers in this case. So we're telling this function that we're going to add from A1 all the way to A5, and if you notice, A5 doesn't have a number, but that doesn't stop the function. It's going to cover A1, and if you notice, the highlighted range is all the way from A1 to A5, not A1 and A5. Okay, so you put a colon between two cell addresses, and it's going to cover a range. It's going to cover a whole space and not just one number. So I'll do that. We're going to add numbers A1 all the way to A5. And if you look at the formula bar, it shows me the actual contents of the cell. So here you'll see 92, but in the formula bar you'll see that we're actually using a function that covers from A1 to A5 to get our answer, which is 92. If we were to do this the manual way, we would have to put equals, and then we would have to put A1 plus, and then we have to go and select A2 plus A3 plus A4 plus A5. Alright, that's the manual way. That's how we were doing it previously. You notice it's the same answer. It's not wrong by any means. It's just it's more typing or more additional work for the user. Alright, and notice how this one is referring to each cell address individually, and that's why each one is colored differently, because we're associating them by each individual address, whereas with the one using the function and a range, we're referencing the address as a range. So it's going from A1 all the way to A5, and notice it's one singular color because it's referencing from A1, and then the colon says up to A5. You can do the same thing when using the sum function as well. You can say equals sum, open bracket, and again the brackets are important because the brackets tell us, alright, in here is where we're going to put our cell addresses. So I can do it individually using the sum function as well. So I can say A1, and then I can put comma this time. If you want to reference a cell address individually and not use a range for functions, you use the comma. And if you notice, the little pop-up here shows you how to use the function if you're using individual cell addresses. So let's say I want to add A1, I want to add A2, comma. Let's change it up a bit. We already know adding up all the numbers in column A is 92. But let's add a number from B3, comma again. Let's add a number. Let's close our function and then we press enter. And we get an answer of 95. But 95 is adding 15, which is A1, plus 35, plus 10, which is B3, plus 35, which is C1. So note how to use or when to use ranges and when to use the commas. You'd want to use the range if you for a fact want to add a total for this entire column, or maybe adding a whole group of numbers. However, if you're very specific to what you need to add, then use the commas and add them individually. So here in A6 we have range, which is using the colon, and in A7 we have individual cell addresses, which we still add. I'm still using the function sum for them, but one is a range and one is individual cells. This one is the manual operation where I'm adding individual cells, but I'm using the plus sign. Functions allow us to not have to use the plus sign, and we use the function name, which in this case is sum, capital SUM. Notice in these functions I don't use any signs at all, because Excel has programmed these functions to do one job. They know what they need to do. It is up to us to figure out what the function does before we start using it. So we're going to cover 5 functions today. If you click on the button, it's going to go ahead and automatically put sum for you, because this symbol here is usually used for sum. But if you click on the arrow on the right of it, it's going to give you a choice, either any of these 5 or more functions. If you click on more functions, cancel that, it's gonna have you try and add more. Let me do this better. Go to an empty space and then click more functions. It's gonna bring up a list of different functions that Excel comes with. Excel isn't limited to just these functions here. If you go ahead and put all, you get hundreds and hundreds of functions. But we're not gonna use most of these for this class, right? We're just gonna study these 5 for now. So I'll delete these ones for now. And let's just go ahead and quickly showcase these 4 remaining functions. We've done sum. We know sum adds numbers together. So what about average? Well, when you click on average, it's going to put the function name for you, which is conveniently average, and remember, all capital letters. It provides the brackets for you, so it gives you a place to put in the numbers or the set that you want to work with. Now, average is a function that depends on multiple numbers, because if you're going to find the average of something, it's usually because you have more than one number. And to find the average of a group of numbers is to add all the numbers up and then divide the total by the quantity of numbers. So in this case, we're covering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cells. So what this average is going to do is add up all 5 cells, and then it's going to divide that total by 5. So notice it automatically selects A1 to A5 for me, but let's say I don't want to do A1 and A5. I want to do B1 to B5, and notice it's covering a large space here because I went backward with B1 covering to A5. So I don't want that. I want to calculate the average for the column B. So again, you notice you can mix and match all these numbers. Once you're using the cell addresses, you can use the colon to cover our range, and then the average of these numbers here is 17. Note that this is also including B5, which is 0, so it's gonna still divide by 5, but it's not gonna add anything for this number. It's gonna be plus 0 in this case. If I want, I can put B4 to ignore cell or row 5, and then it's still 17 in this case. So maybe it didn't add b5, maybe it didn't divide by 5 in that case because there was no number there. So again, let's do equals, let's do average, and this time we can do it individually. So we select b1 comma b2 comma, and you see the trend here. Selecting them one by one is a little bit more time consuming than just using the range, but you have to know when to use the range. Range is for when you have a set group of numbers, but if you needed the average of a1 and a3 and c3 and b2, then you can't do a range like that, because if you say from a1 to c3, it's gonna cover all of a1 and all the way to c3, and this is not what we want. So choose the time when you're going to do the average or function of a group of numbers or a range using the colon, or when you're going to use individual cell addresses or individual values. Okay, so just to give you an example again, average with the individual cell address, average with a range from b1 to b4. Alright, so that's what average does. Again, it does exactly what it says, average, and a lot of these functions are named after what they do, because it's just simple for the user to say, alright, well, I need the average of a group of numbers. What function would be good to calculate average? Well, I will assume the one that says average. Count numbers basically does a count of how much cells are selected. So if I count from A1 to A5 and I press enter, it says 4 because there's only 1, 2, 3, 4 numbers. I'm still covering A5, but then there's no number on A5, so it tells me that, okay, out of this range you told me to use, there's only 4 numbers. So pretty straightforward. You use this function if you want to count the amount of grades you have. For example, if a student is missing grades, if this was a list of student grades, then maybe the student that was on cell 5 doesn't have any grades and I only have 4 grades, but I know for a fact that I have 5 students. So a count would quickly tell me, well, you're definitely missing grades here because there's less grades than there are students. So that's just one quick example of why you'd use count. Then we go to max. Max is almost similar to count in a way in terms of what it does. It's going to take the largest number from the list you give it and it's going to give you that number. So max from A1 to A5, what's the largest number here? Well, it's 35, and then it returns to you 35. So that's what max does. It gives you the largest number from a group or from a set. Let's say instead of from A1 to A5, let's say I want to cover all numbers, so I'm going to put C5. So it's going from A1 all the way to C5. So it's gonna cross jump from A, it's gonna jump to B, and it's gonna end at C5. So the space or the range here, you're telling them check from A1 all the way to C5. So you're seeing it here that if you're using a range, it's basically all or nothing. And if you want to use individual references and using the commas, then you can mix and match one from this column, one from that column. So what's the largest number from this set? Just from looking at it, you should be able to tell me that, okay, 35, no, there's a number bigger than 35, that's 47. But wait, 77 is bigger than that. So just from a quick look, you should be able to say that 77 should be your answer, and that's what it prints out. So that's all max does. It looks for the largest number from a set you give it, and it prints out that number. Why would you want to use a function like that? Maybe you want to know what's the highest grade. If this was a group of grades, then the highest grade so far was a 77, which isn't really good, but that's what we have here in our list, right? And then the last function we're gonna cover is the min function. And just like max, it goes and look for a number, but in the name you could tell that it looks for the minimum number. So it's the smallest number from this group now. I'm gonna do the same thing here. I'm gonna move it to C5 instead of A because I want it to give me the smallest number from the entire set. Press enter and it looks like 10 is the smallest number out of this entire set. Again, similar to max, it looks for a number, but because of the name tells you what it does. Minimum. What's the minimum number here? 10. And in this case, the lowest grade would be 10, which again is really not good. Alright, so those are the 5 functions we're going to cover for today. It's the functions that are displayed when you click on the function arrow. Remember, click on the arrow to show options, click on the button to make it do a sum. Alright, so knowing these 5 functions, you should be able to do your assignment on Thursday. I've already written the assignment. I just need to post it, but I'll do it on Thursday, so I'll give you guys time to read. Please read the Word document that I post for today. It has more information. The assignment on Thursday will be just like the one last week. I have an Excel file. The Excel file displays the questions. The form are from 1 to 10. I didn't do number 1 for you this time because you should understand by now. Please read the notes. Note 1. Carefully look whether a colon or a comma is used, because based on whether it's a comma or a colon, the answers will be different. Pay attention to which cell addresses are being used. Remember, when we're using commas, I can select different addresses, so you're going to have to play a little bingo with yourself. So if I say C4, which is this one here, sum. So that means I need to add these numbers, C4 plus C3 plus A1. So please make note and pay attention to which cell addresses are being referenced in these functions here. Alright. Again, for these 4 questions here with the little star, it's because I'm using something other than sum. So what is the largest number? And I'm basically describing what these 4 questions are doing in each line. So that's just there to help you out. Make sure you, again, pay attention to those cell addresses. Look at the name of the formula, at the function itself, before you answer so you don't make mistakes. As usual, it's name, class, then number 1, your answer, number 2, your answer, up to number 10. Alright, that's your assignment. I won't post it till Thursday, so you won't have access to it right away. For now, just make sure you read and understand the notes that were given. Alright guys, I'll end there. We went 23 minutes. I'm pretty sure like 5 minutes are just me reminding you and just telling you what you need to do. So next week, maybe I'll shorten it a little bit. Alright guys, see you next week if there's no problems. If you have questions, comment in the stream, comment in the classroom, and I'll try and answer you as soon as I can. Alright guys, see you.